Men and women, as they age, there are changes in fat cell number. One of the interesting things about the fat cells as we age is that we make almost all of our fat cells during childhood and puberty. And then once we finish puberty, we're done. That number of fat cells, in most people, there are some people who are an exception to this, and that's about 15% of people who are in the obese category. But most people reach a limit, and that's their fat cell number essentially for adulthood. And then around as we are getting past adulthood, which of course is beyond 40, so I'm just presenting a bigger spectrum of time at the moment, then we get to our 60s or so, 70s, and then the number of fat cells we have starts to decline. It sounds like that's a good thing, but what's happening is if a person is continuing to eat the same way they were before, that grew their fat cells to however big they got, big or small, too much, too full, or not, whatever they were, if they had fat cells that were big and now overfull, and now they're starting to lose their fat cell number, that doesn't mean they're losing fat mass. What that does mean is that the fat that was being stored in 5 fat cells, as you cut off 2 of them because they die now and they aren't replaced with another fat cell, which is what's been happening the whole time before then. One dies every 10 years-ish and another one takes its place. Now you don't have that turnover. And so the fat that was being held in 5 fat cells, well, now that's only being held in 2 or 3 fat cells, meaning those remaining fat cells have had to carry a larger fat burden. And what you're doing is putting the fat cell in the perfectly wrong situation, which is forcing fat cells to be overfull, or what's called hypertrophied or hypertrophic. And a hypertrophic fat cell is a bad fat cell. That's a fat cell that's misbehaving. It's becoming pro-inflammatory and insulin resistant, and then promoting that insulin resistance throughout the rest of the body. So lest we look at the decline in fat cell number as a good thing, it could be. I do think there's an opportunity there, but it would involve the aging person to change their diet accordingly to make sure that there is lower energy and lower insulin, that when that fat cell is turned over, well, there was nothing really left in it anyway, or when it died. And so we're not forcing a remaining fat cell to carry the burden of this fat that this dying fat cell has dropped at its feet. So now to bring this back to a woman who's, say, in her 40s or getting towards menopause, estrogens are undeniably a protective effect when it comes to insulin sensitivity and overall healthy fat storage. Now, estrogens, that family of hormones that we call estrogens, there's not one single hormone called estrogen, of course. They play a very interesting role in fat metabolism, particularly in a woman who has so much more estrogens than a man does. But estrogens are overall protective against too much fat. We know this from animal and human studies. If you remove the ovaries and remove those big, strong estrogen signals, fat mass starts to go up quickly. So there's something protective against too much fat mass when it comes to the estrogens in general. And then separate from this is that estrogens actually promote a healthy form of fat storage by promoting fat storage primarily on the butt and hips of the woman, which is the main site of fat storage for most women. That is actually a site of fat storage that promotes greater hyperplasia, where rather than having fat cells grow bigger and bigger and bigger, it rather says, all right, you are a little fat cell. There's high insulin, we're telling you to store more. Well, rather than get really big, let's just make a new little fat cell right beside it. And so it might seem like a bit of a paradox, but estrogens essentially help a woman store fat in small, healthy fat cells. Even though there are more fat cells in general, it ends up being an overall healthier profile. And that's why women are almost always fatter than men, but healthier than men at the same time. Her body is literally supposed to have more fat than the man's, and she needs more fat than the man's to be healthy for normal fertility and other processes as well.